building brands in the age of collaboration and what Hello Kitty taught me about hype drops. My role has shifted into product development, so I focus on product innovation. I feel like creatives, we have like 9 lives, like cats. I've worked in corporate communications, I've worked in branding, product innovation, advertising, etc. And now in this role, I kind of have a different view on how I approach brand building from the product out, and how that influences all the agencies within the chain of creativity to land our positioning in the market, and how we actually address consumer needs and fulfill their aspirations, their demands, their desires. It's hard to talk about this without, reflecting on where I come from too. My parents have a branding agency, and I grew up in their studio. They were old school 80s communication, so one-way dialogue with customers, and it's very much that seismic transformation that we see in consumers today and their expectations of brands that we full-heartedly have to embrace as marketers or brand builders. Right now, we see brands having direct access with customers, and with that comes an understanding of their real interests. Data is informing personalization, data is informing the direction of trends, and how we can better address the customer journey and take and capture more of the customer journey so that they land on our brand versus others. And with that also comes consumers who have very, very high expectations. I feel like everybody is a designer and a photographer with Instagram and iPhones. Consumers are extremely sophisticated and understanding ingredients, etc., that was once upon a time niche is really fully accessible. So it is this thumb war of sorts between brands, channels, customers, etc., and trying to create something that's really seamless is my objective. And with that comes brands that need to take a more responsible place in society and actually have a lot of sway and a lot of influence in the way people view things. Especially now, content is beyond traditional media formats. It's not like we're watching TV or reading magazines anymore, but everyone is a media producer. And it's a role for brands to take their stance in social issues. Brands can be therapists. Brands can shine a light on things that are really important to society, whether that be the plastic conversation, the environment, or inclusivity, diversity. And so fundamentally, I am in the throes between increasing value and increasing revenue. Creating brand value as a once upon a time, hardcore strategist. It's all about long-term brand building. You're not looking for easy wins and short wins. And this is why I kind of come to Hello Kitty. And how it is something that I often slam when I think about partnerships and collaboration. Frankly, with Hello Kitty, it seems like an easy win. It seems like delivering on design, logo slapping. And as I was developing this presentation, I really had kind of reflected on my bias on whether I preferred Hello Kitty or not, what it represented, and frankly, taking a step back and putting myself back into what is my role as kind of an oracle or a mediator between opportunity, business opportunity, and consumer demand. So this statement is really important to me. So when product parity is so achievable, design is the new IP. When a brand like Supreme can brand a brick and people are clamoring over to buy a freaking brick, you really have to question what is the role and the value that Supreme is delivering against? And what is it activating and what is it triggering in people fundamentally? Because fundamentally, this is me, novelty is a distraction. The FOMO is real, and FOMO has been around forever. I mean, for me, frankly, this is my brother who is drinking something far more delicious, and I certainly desired it. Novelty distracts us from the bigger picture. Novelty distracts us from what human need our products are actually delivering against. And my caveat here is trying not to fall into the trap of logo slapping. This sinister little cat. Hello Kitty has collaborated with friggin' everything, all right? It's gone premium, and it's silver with Swarovski crystals. First class and business class airplane experiences. It has collabed with a gasoline brand. It's super cool, and it's street art. Hello Kitty is fascinating in that regard. It's a total low-key hype beast that we often overlook because it's genius. And to take a detour a little bit, to look at their collaboration with McDonald's, right, in Taiwan. They did a collab. Hello Kitty was delivering merchandise with McD's, and people were waiting in line. People started fights over getting the merchandise. A customer threatened one of the staff members at McDonald's by knife point, and the restaurant had to shut. And you're like, damn, Hello Kitty is freaking awesome. Like, huge demand. People love it. So why should I hate on it, right? Maybe I should learn a thing or two from Hello Kitty. So as the OG, and this is Hello Kitty Gang, this is the latest thing as of last year, collaborating with Ministry of Sound, which is so random, to do fitness dance parties in the mornings. It's like, wow, there is nothing Hello Kitty cannot do. And so these are my learnings. Relevance through the product lens. In fact, it leverages other people's brands to stay relevant, actually. It may very well dilute the Ministry of Sounds. It might actually dilute Ministry of Sounds' brand value. Hello Kitty is gaining every time, and it's freaking genius. It lives where consumers live, and it recruits new audiences. So, how much do you think this brand is valued? It is a $7 billion brand, which is wildly arresting to me, which means it's doing something really, really good, right? There's something to learn here in terms of how this brand has stayed relevant through collaboration, maybe at the detriment of others, but it is something to bear in mind and puts aside my self-belief bias. Letting go of our assumptions, frankly, is our role as marketers. It's not about what I like. It's not what I prefer. It's not what I personally believe and want to drive forward and impress upon a strategy. We really have to actively listen and take a step back to define our road to success in terms of delivering against what customers frankly want. This is a little bit of a how. Intuitively, I don't know if anyone's read How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp. That is the holy Bible of brand building. That is what I read when I was on the agency side and what everyone's reading now that I'm on the brand side. But building brands with key brand assets, so basically identifiable assets that people relate and associate with your brand. I want to build it beyond your key brand assets, and I think that's an important part of consideration when you are doing collaboration. This interesting statistic shared by the Aaron Bass Institute was only 16% of ads are correctly recalled and attributed to a brand. So as you can see behind me, dad and child smiling with each other, having a wonderful bonding moment. It could be orange juice, it could be milk, it could be coffee, it could be cereal. All of these tropes that we play with and have roles, metaphors have roles in advertising. But as you can see, you can't really identify what any of these brands are. So are they successful, or are we just pummeling the same kind of messaging that we're all used to? If I can't recall that this is brand X, are they really going to think about me when they're at the shopping aisle, right? So that's fundamentally what key brand assets are for, to enable you to in your creative and in your strategy to integrate that into the scene. So for example, on the left of me is the blue tones, actually, which is quite a clever way of the brand integrating a few of their key brand assets into the scene. It doesn't mean we have to kind of represent the logo everywhere and becomes a logo slapping exercise. We fundamentally have these latent triggers that is our role to stimulate when we create a piece of creative. This is the hardworking assets model that I co-created with my team at Cowen, with Jason Brady and Paul Galeslut. It is a really intuitive way of delivering strategy visually. I'm a really visual person. I feel like strategic documents should be really simple and easy to understand. And when you have complex problems, like how do I create a new product? How do I create a new campaign? I put it out in this circular chart. So in the center, you have the brand positioning, what the brand's ethos, values, and fundamentally it's strategic positioning in the marketplace. Then around it in that inner circle, you have its visual graphic equities. So that could be shape, color, etc. You have the verbal, tone, and personality. How do I communicate? What does my voice sound like when I connect with my customers? Experiential, and often we forget about sonic branding. Sonic branding actually has almost the same recall as sight, visual equities. Olfactory, tactile. The product attributes, so this is kind of like my little sliver here. I'm very focused on product at the moment. So what are the attributes of my product? What are its flavors? Am I only exotic ingredients? Or am I a cracker? Am I a wheat-based product, for example? And then culture, my role in culture. What are the tribes that I reflect and represent? And then around it is kind of like my campaign ring. So if I'm going to do a limited edition, I can start challenging what's my extended visual language. If I'm a black brand, maybe it makes sense to stand out with a limited edition that's white in a very basic way. So you start seeing how everything ladders up to each other. Everything kind of builds into the psychology and triggers from a visual perspective and how they're developing memory structures. So I'll give you an example with some of my work with Neutrogena. Neutrogena being America's #1 skincare brand, definitely a legacy brand with an ethos of providing access to great healthcare from the Johnson & Johnson mother brand, but most famous for a glycerin bar. As you can see, it has not really evolved with the times. It's a really functional product simply because it's quite a dermatological focused brand. And skincare has rapidly evolved. If K-wave beauty, J-wave beauty, C-wave beauty, into a very sensorial, experiential process, and quite an emotional investment. And once upon a time, I suppose, when they first launched, it was an emotional investment, but that functional benefit was really important to the brand. So when we repositioned, actually, the makeup line, we anchored it on makeup fueled by skincare. So makeup was, interestingly, part of the Neutrogena brand, but had a weird role. No one really understood what its role was in the portfolio and how it laddered up to health and beauty. So as you can see here, it's really stripped back. It's all about skincare, really highlighting the ingredients and how it delivers on skincare. And as we're innovating on products, created a new line called N by Neutrogena that focused on a different target audience, but still has that clean, refined, pared back look that's really important to the new positioning of Neutrogena with this gray banding, because the gray banding is part of the mother brand when you look at the skincare lines. So from a communications perspective, we're trying to ladder it all up into a holistic brand experience and portfolio, even when we go down to developing limited editions with celebrities. This was a Kerry Washington campaign, And this is the first time that Kerry Washington had her hair in natural curls in Neutrogena history, which is astounding. But as a brand that represents inclusivity and beauty in its natural form and health, it only makes sense that Kerry Washington has her natural curls. So it's little things like that that kind of play into the way you identify. So I use that hardworking assets model as a way to identify whether creative is on brand or not. How do we push new products out, and if it should be put into a sub-brand. So it's an intuitive visual model that's been really helpful for me. So from an innovation perspective, innovation, as Felix actually just mentioned, design is just about creating solutions to fulfill unmet needs, right? This is an example that evolved out of Neutrogena, but because of the guise of innovation, it's kind of secret, so I can't share the final output. But the strategy is important, I think, of walking you through how we approach new opportunities. So looking at young women, in the US specifically, but I see rates of this all over the world, young people, we are facing the highest rates of suicide and depression than any other generation or year prior to this. And this quote is quite arresting. We're on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. So how is this relevant to a skincare brand? When you're looking at a role a brand plays in playing into a need for guidance in a ritual of self-care and self-belief and self-love, you're looking at this rise in activities that kind of support that. The rise of JOMO, the joy of missing out, this kind of pressure to constantly be active and engage in society. You see the rise of on-demand delivery services and how people are actually have great reason to stay at home. And then you look at the Department of Labor statistics, and they say millennials spent 70% more time at home than the general population. And everyone was like, you're all superficial and want to Instagram everything that you're eating. Millennials spend 70% of their time, frankly, at home. They're cocooning. They're responding to elements around their world that invite us as innovators, as marketers, to understand why. And so without showing you the resolution, this is kind of how we begin to build products. Okay, if people are staying at home, my product is an at-home use. It fits into that occasion. When I wash my face for 15 minutes and I put on a face mask, it's an opportunity to give them a moment to uplift, to reflect, to feel good. And that's my role in their life as a brand. And so I urge all of us to think outside of, I guess, traditional research, to not look at what is defining behaviors of the past, but actually looking at economics, looking at healthcare, looking at US Department of Labor statistics to inform us what actually is driving consumers' needs right now. Because if I only looked at my category, I would do another jelly lip thing, something super cute. I might Hello Kitty it, right? I think fundamentally, our sweet spot here is looking what people, business, and technology can fundamentally deliver against. Looking beyond your category, as I'm rambling about my reflection on my role in this job and industry, frankly, we're often blinded by our self-belief. I'm a big proponent of ethnography, and that often there's not budget to be able to go to market and observe firsthand. I stress reading everything. Like, I follow 7,500 people on Instagram. It's a great source of figuring out what people at markets that I am not at are doing and seeing and eating and engaging with. I get to see what excites them. I get to see how they are having dinner or what's in their shelfie, right? It's a great way of finding news, to much of the detriment of my real personal friendships. But I think what's important is we face perceptual bias. The same way that I think that Hello Kitty is flippant, it frankly is not, and is delivering on a nostalgia kick that really means a lot to consumers. And so ethnography actually was born out of within anthropology to remove anthropology from ethnocentrism, really getting into culture and understanding what motivates people and how they are connected. Strategically monitor trends so you're not surprised by what other people developed. Trends are just an analogy for change. It is a set of patterns that help you identify what the future might hold. And it could be a short-term future, it could be a long-term future. And so when I'm talking about being ambidextrous, it means to be able to balance what is in the short term, because I have to deliver revenue, and the future, the far future, because I also have to deliver value to my brand. And fundamentally, we should be asking, how are trends influencing my industry? How does it suggest new partnerships that I should consider? How will my competitors harness this new trend to compete against me? It's starting with a wider definition of X, as I shared earlier, looking beyond what is obvious, looking at different points of data if you can't be at market, and frankly, being a really good stalker and building your own patterns yourself, because that's firsthand information sometimes. Often you can build relationships with thought leaders or people that you feel are really in touch with culture. And that is trusting your gut. Often what I find as an innovator, what I see is often not supported by data yet. And so it's very hard for me to validate a point of direction when it's not obvious enough. And by the time it shows up in a focus group discussion, it's already too late. It's mainstream. So how are you launching something competitive? Right? Building a case comes from looking at different data points. So nicely put is looking at the unusual suspects in a criteria. So back to what I do. I work for the world's largest alcohol business, and we also have a non-alcohol brand called Seedlip. The question often arises, so I'm preempting it from the audience, is what happens to an alcohol brand when the world is drinking less, and if there's a trend of people not drinking at all? So, of course, in reflection, I can pivot in terms of what is the world's largest alcohol business actually delivering against? We can be the world's largest entertainment business. We make experiences more multisensorial and exciting when you're out or when you're at home. We can be the world's largest social bonding business, meaning when you do come together, we create quality products that are fun, a ritual that unites people around the table, whether it's a cheers, whether it's the way we serve something, the way we talk about a product. Or we're the world's largest experience business. Do we go into a realm of pop-ups and multiple pop-ups around the world that speak to our brand, fulfilling this like brand temple trend that we see happening all over the world, whether that's flagship stores or collab experiences? So those are some of the questions that I'm asking myself, but I can't reveal how we're addressing that, but frankly, things that are top of mind. And last but not least, once you have identified a positioning and created critical questions as a way into developing products and campaigns, how do we galvanize the tribe that already loves your brand or that you want to recruit into your brand? So I'll use an example of one of my favorite single malts, Talisker. It's probably one of the tightest positionings that we have in our portfolio. So Talisker is from the Isle of Skye, which is this incredible, rugged isle off Scotland. It's kind of like New Zealand, such rugged terrain, hardly anything grows on it. Very few people live on this island, and there is a distillery where there shouldn't be a distillery because it's really hard to get anything there. Frankly, when it first started, trying to get a boat into that cove would have been a huge challenge. And yet, a distillery is there. It's at maximum capacity. It's called Talisker Made by the Sea because it's made by the sea. And when you taste it, there's this wonderful little briny, salty flavor. How Talisker has collaborated with other brands coming out of this rugged, elemental adventure, which is what the brand stands for, they have sponsored the Atlantic Challenge. What is not more rugged than crossing the Atlantic by boat, by rowboat, which is so intense? It makes sense for the brand. It ladders up to what we stand for, which is elemental adventure, really being in communion with nature, not against it, but just in communion and working with that similar power, right? This is a shoe brand called Oliver Sweeney, which is killer, frankly. It's quite like a high-end, luxurious brand. And they did a limited edition set with boots, with a little pocket flask or a foot pocket flask with a Talisker. So for someone who's hiking and wants to reach the peak and enjoy their experience in the adventure, you've got a wee flask with you. And last but not least, the way we serve oysters of Isle of Skye, but delicious. Again, briny, salty flavors coming together. So if you think about that hardworking assets, I'm just triggering all those things that make you think about the sea and make you think about this raw elemental form of experiencing a delicious whiskey. So even if I am not personally an adventurer, if I don't go hiking because I live in Singapore, but I like to think of myself as someone who likes nature, I could drink a Talisker and I align myself with those values. Collaboration, frankly, should be strategically led. It should capture the values in which your brand upholds and the vision in which you want to aspire your consumers to believe in, right? Whether that is your stake in a social place or, frankly, about creating wonderful experiences that are halos to your brand. And if we continue to logo slap or collaborate without purpose, frankly, there is a place in business for that. But if you're thinking about experience-driven, value-driven businesses, we might have to second-guess our strategy. The end.
Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Amazing talk. I was really inspired. Thank you for that. Question for you. How long does innovation take? I feel like in the design industry, a lot of people are always, nowadays, okay, so on one hand, brand building does take time, but on the other hand, getting to market really quickly, I find a lot of industries now do a lot of these design sprints and try to get to market really, really quickly. So what are your thoughts on how long innovation should take? And yeah.
I do think that a lot of creative becomes really reactionary because there's so much more competition now. And again, product parity is so achievable, right? Sophistication of creative and design is at a level I haven't really seen ever before. But I do think that, depends. Disruptive innovation, meaning something that is new to world or new behavior that you're introducing to the market, takes time, and it takes ethnography, which we invest in. It takes a really good competitive analysis of the market, but understanding what, like for example, if we're going to launch a new non-alcoholic beverage, what do people really want, actually? What is the adult factor versus the fun factor? How do I balance those things? That creates a lot of, we create samples, we live test it, we constantly reiterate. So I would say that takes probably like a year or 2 years. Of course, there's always stress to launch it within like 6 months. My cycle looks like 3 months, frankly, when we're launching from ideation to delivery. We're looking at 3 to 6 months before we launch a product into the market. And that includes conceptual development to production, execution, activation ideas. And we have to, because the customer is expecting more from us, so it's hard. I wish I had more time.
Thank you for your presentation, Grace. I wanted you to dig a little deeper and maybe walk us through how you make the case for those creative bets where you're saying, all right, if I have this gut feeling that this is where we should probably be investing. Can you walk us through how you kind of manage the different stakeholders and reassert that value and conviction?
Okay, so like 5 years ago, I got really excited about gaming. And right now, if anyone's paying attention, gaming is unavoidable. It's a huge, multi-billion-dollar industry with esport gaming events taking over the Olympic stadiums, right? Back then, it was what I received, and this is not from Diageo, but other clients, it would be, gaming is too niche. Is it really aspirational? You know, it's not really a sport. What are these communities, do they really actually have a community greater that we can propel and create aspiration? Brand design, for example, or marketing is always about aspiration, right? So what I tend to do is visualize the bigness possibility of it, right? Then it was a girl gaming group in Hong Kong. It was like, all right. And then the big conversation was about female empowerment, how we're going to support the female conversation in, let's say, beauty or not. So it was about highlighting a subsect group, being able to communicate their tension. So it was very inwardly focused. So I break down the human need and barriers that they're facing, the bigger collective. Numbers are really important. How many gamers are there in the world, in particular markets that we serve? What is the rise, the projected rise? And they're often data points. You really have to scour the web for data points that define that. If not, it's the number of people that log into a particular game. So you can kind of extrapolate from there. The diversity of gamers, the medium age of gamers, etc. So I build a very data-driven case, and then I visualize all of the worlds around it. So you can see what the solution can be. So if I have a League of Legends look and feel, I'm like, and then you will launch a makeup with League of Legends, right? Which is what Mac did. So that's kind of how I approach it. I don't really have a method, and it's not always a proven science. It really depends who I'm speaking to. But I do feel like data is important, because when you're responsible for millions of dollars, you have to be able to have that rooted, grounded, beyond the gut, direction.
Hi, just a quick question. In a world that is so noisy and almost tone deaf, because everybody loves to use big keywords like experience and so forth. So how do you engage, how do you maintain the momentum of engagement with your audience in such a competitive world?
Well, I think of the audience of one, actually. Thinking about like one niche customer and really honing in on that. So Talisker is a good example of like what our brand stands for, and constantly developing content around that stimulates that. And so the adventure traveler, for example, could be super luxurious, and then I play with different codes of luxury that speak to crazy helicopter rides in the Everest, and then you have Talisker at the top of Everest, for example. And so I feel like communication or collaboration is like the new localization strategy. Nobody wants a faceless target. No one wants to be a faceless target. And so identifying that one-to-one at various segments, I like give them names, like John does this and this. It helps me humanize and personalize who I'm speaking to. I don't tend to do advertising to caveat, because I'm more on the product side. But we do visualize how we want to activate and to market. So when we create products, it is very much to focus on capturing that audience of one. Let's say like a luxury Talisker. What is that going to be like from a product perspective? How do I make it really rare and desirable? And then how do I activate it? And how do I empower my marketing teams and my advertisers and my brand teams and my design teams to be able to communicate the same message? I think we get bored with ourselves really quickly. And that whole hardworking assets model is about saying the same thing all the time, really consistently, because you never know who is coming into your brand at what time.
Thanks, Grace. Good talk. I had a question when you mentioned about working in the world's kind of largest entertainment industry. When it drives innovation, is there a kind of a weighting towards product innovation versus packaging innovation? And does one generally inspire or drive the other one?
I think it goes hand in hand, frankly. So packaging innovation is an output of product innovation, right? So it's like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve with this new product? And could it be better solved with a new packaging format? So for example, if we know there are more consumers drinking out of home or in on-the-go occasions, how do I create a product that fits into that need state? Perhaps I shouldn't be developing 1-liter bottles made out of glass. Perhaps I should be developing something that's smaller, more portable, that fits into a lifestyle of mobility, right? So I think that they need to go together. Sometimes we have objectives. I mean, obviously, as a big company, to fulfill sustainability goals, we have to look at packaging in order to fulfill those goals, and we're on a mission to be a more sustainable company. As a result, we're looking at our roadmap in terms of how do we be more efficient? How do we optimize the materials we have? How we do that better?